Okay, so lots of stuff has happened since the last video, and so we're going to go over some of the big ones. The biggest one we're going to be discussing today is the stimulus package. Oh, the package. I am not a fan of the stimulus at all. So I have several bones to pick with this. So let's go into a few of these. The first one is the cost. $2.2 trillion dollars. That is equivalent to almost 10%, well, basically 10% of the US GDP. We are about 22 trillion. Overnight, we spent 10% of that on this bill. Now, the problem with any bill of this magnitude and importance in the eyes of Congress is that anytime a bill like this garners this much attention and requires it to be passed, it's debatable if it's required or not, but in the eyes of the public and politicians, it's required to be passed. They're going to tack on so many other ridiculous bills to it because they want to pass those other bills along with the big bill. And that is what happened. That is what has happened. You have hundreds of millions of dollars flowing into random projects that have nothing to do with the trying to slow the spread. It has nothing to do with the virus whatsoever. But yet, it just got tacked on. So the fact that the government is spending all this money is not okay. That is my first problem I have with it. The 2.2 trillion, uh, just absurd sums of money. Um, but the fact that they passed this bill and then they're going to give like $1,200 to each American citizen, that's not going to have the impact that they're hoping for, especially since this is going to come out like in 3 weeks' time. And things will look dramatically different in 3 weeks' time. At least I'm hoping it will be, because I'm hoping people will quit panicking and quit freaking out and start thinking logically instead of emotionally. But, anyways, okay, so the checks aren't going to be going out for like another 3 weeks. But there are other solutions that they could have looked at other than just trying to bury the problem with money or bury the problem under money. And one of the solutions that they could have looked at would be to go ahead and stop rent payments. Now, in economics, rent refers to like mortgage and rent, both residential and commercial, like it means all of that. So, what they could have done is to go ahead and make sure that the citizens didn't have to pay rent for however long we're dealing with this. So if it's a month or 2 months or 3 months, that they just stop payments for that time frame. That would have been a much more efficient solution than to be like, well, we'll give like $1,000 or $1,200 per person, because if you've got some money coming in, but your mortgage is like 50% of your income, yeah, that helps, but it's not going to alleviate the pressure as much as we need it to, as much as what they are hoping the bill to accomplish, right? So if they would have just made sure that, hey, look, rent, mortgage payments and rent owners, like you can't charge rent for however long we want to do this, and you'll just extend the contract to for those rents to be due in a future time. That would have been a better solution. Now, I know there's some mortgage companies, which I don't understand why they're doing this, but they're like, hey, we'll stop your payments. And then when they start up again, you owe us a lump sum of everything that's owed plus your regular payment. What? That's not accomplishing anything. That's not helping people at all. If you just go ahead and extend the length of the mortgage payment to, like an additional 2 or 3 months out or however long this is going for, then that would help to alleviate the pressure at this point in time. That would be a better solution than what they're doing right now. And especially since rents are outpacing income. So Pew Research did a study, and they showed that from 2001 to 2015, incomes did not outpace rent. Rent outpaced income by a fairly large margin. On top of that, the age demographic in which rents are mostly paid for, you know, the demographic that pays rent most is 65 plus in age. And so basically the people that are the highest risk of, the virus are also the biggest renters, are also the biggest amount that are rent burdened. And so they are at high risk here all around. And yet we're not really addressing this issue. This bill doesn't really address this very well at all. And so that's why I'm like, oh, I'm not a fan of this. On top of that, we are talking about increasing taxes in the future. Holy cow, we are going to increase huge amount of taxes in the future. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to pay more taxes. I don't know anybody that wants to pay more taxes. And so we're just kind of kicking this can down the road and causing prices to increase, or taxes to increase rather, for everybody. And this is not going to be for anybody's benefit. And so I'm not a fan of the stimulus. I don't think the airlines should get a bailout, like I said in the last video. Airlines, hotels, some movie theaters want bailout too. Are you kidding me? No. If the markets have corrections, these industries can also have corrections. But that is my biggest problems with the package, with the stimulus package. It was not well thought out. It's an election year. All the politicians want to look like they're doing something, and they are just like, hey, we'll just throw money. That's always a popular thing. They didn't think this through. They didn't really think about what the American people need in order to deal with the fact that we are having massive layoffs. And that's another problem with the bill that I have. The bill was supposed to help prevent layoffs and firings. We are not seeing that at all. And of course, the bill just passed. But even with it passing, I mean, you would think companies would be like, okay, we can hold off on firing because we're going to get this money from the government. No, they're just like, we're going to just lay off everybody. Now, I told you guys in the last video, and I don't think I clarified it though. So I told you guys the U.S. economy is very dependent on small businesses. The reason, and this is what I meant by I didn't clarify it in the last video, I didn't clarify why they're dependent. The reason we're dependent on small businesses is because small businesses are the biggest employers of American citizens. So when you've got these companies that are closing their doors, we're having massive layoffs, more so than we did, during the financial crisis. Now, during the financial crisis, the reason this is different is because during the financial crisis, it affected everybody. Big corporations, small companies, it affected everybody. And the reason the Federal Reserve injected cash was to make sure that the banks would have more than enough that they could keep lending out money so there was cash flow for businesses big and small. Right now, we're not addressing that. I mean, the Federal Reserve has pledged unlimited support for the U.S. economy and basically making sure that the banking sector has unlimited access to funds. But it won't matter if these businesses are closing. It won't matter if they're shutting down because they're being forced to shut down. And so the bill is not going to have the impact nor the outcome that it's hoping for. It's just reckless spending. That's all it really comes down to, honestly. So I have major problems with this bill. And again, nobody is bothering to really think about this. All the politicians are like, we're just going to throw money at this. It makes this look popular, and then we can tout this during, November when we are up for a re-election. And that is just, it's not helping anyone. And people need to wake up and realize this. And so that is a problem I have with this. Now, the markets. Let's talk about the markets. Okay, so last week the markets were, going up. This week they've been down. We keep having these fluctuations, which is fine. It's sad to say that if it's less than 2,000 points down, that it's a good day. That's really sad. Oh my gosh. But that has kind of been a little bit of a norm for the last little bit, where we've had huge swings up and down, 1,000, 1,500 points up or down. It's all over the place. But this is moving differently than the '08 crisis. and on many different levels. The financial crisis, it took time for the markets to go down. So here we go. All right. The financial crisis, officially, the recession began in December of '07. So it started going down, and then the first quarter of '09, it bottomed out. And then we slowly started coming back up, and it took us a while. It took us till 2012 really to get back up to pre 2008 levels. But once we came up, then we really came up, right? I've shown you guys the graph before where, the markets are being sustained by the cash infusion from the Federal Reserve of the 4.5 trillion. And we had a massive bull run. All right. The difference, though, that we are seeing with this one, okay, is that we haven't had a slow downturn. We've had a precipitous drop going straight down in a very short amount of time. Now, what we should see in this type of scenario, what we should see is a straight V-shape rebound where we went down and we came back up pretty quickly. However, if we keep dragging this out and trying to stop the economy, then we're going to see this shape, and it's going to take a while to get back up. Now, the longer this drags out, the more devastating it will be for the U.S. economy, because that means that growth is really, really, really slow. Consumer confidence is low. People are leery about the markets, and they're not optimistic about the future. And so then people hold back. They're not spending. They're not buying. And 70% of the U.S. GDP is based on consumption. So it's important that we not have this L shape, but that we have this V shape rebound. But that can only happen if people calm down. Oh my gosh, calm the freak down. And I'm not talking about just the American citizens. I am talking about the politicians. The policymakers need to calm down and quit panicking and overreacting. Again, they're not making good policies when they are they're emotional about this and they're not being rational. They're not looking at it from a logical standpoint. They're not looking at all the options that are available. They're just trying to, just throw money at the problems and hope that it fixes it, which it won't. So I'm hoping that we've already hit the bottom because we keep coming back up and we're not pushing up higher right now, but we're not pushing down lower either. So that's an encouraging sign. The next topic that I want to discuss is a national lockdown. Now, everybody keeps talking about, hey, we should do a national lockdown and just, quarantine everybody for 3 weeks. You're talking about basically at that point, you are completely halting the U.S. economy. Holy crap. And we can't do that. The U.S. economy is too complex. It's too big. That would be devastating. And so we have a kind of a counterfactual we can look at when we're talking about lockdowns. Now, the other problem with lockdowns that people are not taking into consideration is that once we come out of our national quarantine, you're going to have a second wave of infections and of contagion. It's what's going to happen when people come into contact with each other. So that's why I'm not in favor of this. Also, again, we have that counterfactual. It's not a perfect counterfactual, mind you, but we have an idea of, okay, what about this other approach to the virus? So this would be Sweden. Sweden actually, there's a lot of controversy around it. A lot of people are angry at Sweden because they are not on lockdown. So the vast majority of Europe is got some strict restrictions on their lockdown. But Sweden, they haven't closed schools, they haven't closed cafes, they haven't closed, gyms. They haven't closed any businesses. They're limiting gatherings to 50 or less, which is fine. And they're of course asking people to be, very cognizant about social distancing. But they're just saying, hey, look, if you're ill or if you're elderly, definitely stay home. Everybody else keep going and going about your business. And if you can work from home and you're feeling sick, then just do that. But they're not mandating anything. They're not forcing anything. And their economy is still moving along. So this will be interesting to see. Now, of course, their population is substantially lower than ours. We're at like 325 million, and they're at 10.12 million. And so the numbers don't compare, but the approach is what we're looking at, and seeing what they look like. And right now, they're fine. I mean, they've got about the same number of cases as Denmark, and they're not showing any signs near the death toll of Italy. And so it's a vastly different approach than what we are doing. And so we'll see how that plays out, and that will be kept a close eye on from everybody. The other thing, that's kind of a counterfactual, is the amount of economic relief that's being uh, utilized in other countries. So what I mean by that is, okay, we just passed a 2.2 trillion stimulus package, plus our Federal Reserve basically pledge unlimited support for the U.S. economy. In the past, I've told you guys in I think it was my modern monetary theory video. Okay, the government is an entity. It's not a household. It doesn't have an expiration date. And when we go into debt and other countries go into debt, then it's all relative. Because if everyone's going to debt, then it's all kind of working the same. Right now, we are going more into debt than what other countries are going into for this stimulus package. That is going to be another counterfactual that we'll be looking at, to see the effects of this. Again, I feel like the bill is really not going to have the outcome and the results that they're trying to target, but we're going to end up with just more debt. And so we'll see how other countries and their responses to the economic slowdowns that are happening without question, what their responses are and what those will result. So these are some good counterfactuals to keep an eye on. And so I'll be doing that, and I encourage you guys to do that as well. And the other thing that I want to talk about is the data. So part of the reason that we seem to be having a lot of information thrown at us, and it's like, well, we think it's this and we think it's that, da, da, da. It's because the data is so incomplete. So much so that even Oxford and Stanford have decided to stop using data from WHO to calculate and make models for the coronavirus. So this is part of the reason that there's so much confusion out in the media right now. And the media is always going to, report worst case scenario because that's what gets ratings. But there's a reason why it seems like the scientists are not on the same page, because they're not on the same page. The data is scattered, and the way that they're collecting the data, when it's being reported, all of that, how it's being collected, what's being collected, all that there's not a standardized way of doing that. And so everybody's collecting data in different ways and reporting it at different times, which is why we see this vast array of information, and why we see mass confusion from the media reporting this and that, and not just media, but really from the scientists. So this is why we're seeing such push and pull on this, and it's just, again, the best thing to do at this point is just to stay calm. Stay calm, try to stay level-headed, try to look at this from a logical standpoint and not from an emotional standpoint, because that's where it gets dangerous. And what I mean by that is, if you look at like Rhode Island and New York, for example, you have all these cases that are happening in New York, and so people are fleeing New York, either to get away from the quarantine and or the virus itself. And Rhode Island completely shut off their state line to New Yorkers. They're just like, hey, you can't come in here. If you do, we'll arrest you. This is what I'm talking about. These are not logical reactions. These are emotional reactions. You're going to see states get very defensive about their state lines. You've got a huge increase in states that are now restricting travel within their state unless it's to do business. And so the more fear that there is and less calm that there is, there's going to be more aggressiveness and defensiveness, from state to state, from people to people. Like, it's not going to help anybody. So really, we need to try to stay as calm as possible. Try not to, put ourselves at risk, obviously. Don't do that. But be calm and try to think logically and not emotionally. And more importantly, wash your hands. Just wash your hands. That's a huge, huge benefit. If you just wash your hands, that will help to slow the spread. But anyway, so there's my video for today. Hopefully that this will start dying down faster and people will stop overreacting, because that is what we're seeing. We're seeing massive overreaction to all of this, and it's not helping anyone. It's just making it worse. So try to stay calm, wash your hands, try to really look at the data. I know, again, it's mixed information right now, but try to find credible sources. So, something that I really like to look at is at the universities, like credible universities, Oxford, Stanford, Johns Hopkins, Harvard, and the reason that I really like these type of sources, because they are not about to sacrifice their academic reputation for anything. It is everything for them. So they're going to make sure that their information and the data that they're reporting, it has integrity behind it. So I am not a fan of the WHO. I'm not even pretend that I am. And I don't, and I can understand why Oxford especially came out and said they're no longer using WHO data. That is totally understandable. So anyways, as always, if you guys have any questions or comments, put them in the comment section below. I'll put some links in the description box. And of course, hit that subscribe button and share this video. Let people know, what this is, there's all this information going around in the media, and I can help break some of that down. And hopefully that's what I've done for you guys. So if you like it, share it with other people. All right, talk with you guys later.